Hello and welcome to this episode of Growthology. I am with a longtime friend. I've really been looking forward to this conversation with Aida Kamber from Code 42. Aida, welcome to Growthology and thanks for taking the time.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to reconnect and talk about growth.
I know we've known each other for a long time, going back to your days at Halyard Health. Actually,
That's
first
right.
connected on social media. I've actually used our engagement on social media as an example of social selling. And I probably would have done that even if we had not won the deal and you decided to go with somebody else. But since then, we've kind of kept in touch. And I thought, who better to have on the podcast to talk about growth and engage than you, seeing as you've kind of risen through the ranks.
Thanks, Carlos. Yeah, I remember the lead base. We've come a long way, both of us, since then. So I was very impressed, though, with your follow-up. I remember filling out a form on your website and getting a phone call within minutes and getting a social media message. And I was like, this company knows how to do it right. They get, at the time, demand generation. So always kind of a milestone in my mind, for sure.
That's great. Yeah, and we could talk about the term demand generation. It seems to be the whole, is it demand gen? Is it, demand capture? I just love these conversations where we try to create all these new things. It's like, let's just go out, engage with our customers. We were talking before as well, though. I love your artwork in the back. I think it's fantastic. We have in our house, our kids are grown and gone, but we still have their artwork and paintings all through the house. So I think you should keep it. And I know we are both fans of natural light, as you can see behind me.
That's right.
I spare the expense on any kind of studio cost or anything like that, and just enjoy what makes me happy, which is sunshine.
Exactly. And this is my reclaimed office, gone to kids' playroom, gone back to my office. So, just is what it is.
I love it. Just as is. So, well, hey, you lead a global marketing team for a technology organization. And, right now the whole focus for marketing teams is shifted dramatically. You mentioned, going from lead-based to where we are today with account-based. And there's been so many other things, but the one thing that I know is CEOs are looking to their CMOs and their heads of marketing to drive growth. So talk about that. Talk about what are you seeing work? Is there one lever you're pulling that you're finding works better than another to really drive growth for your organization?
I think, like everyone else, especially in the current economic climate, is focusing on customers. So I know we've definitely done a big shift as a company that's trying to grow significantly. Since I've been at the company, I have been more focused on acquisition of new logos. And in the last 6 to 12 months, we've definitely shifted. We're still acquisition focused, but definitely shifted to focusing more on our customer. It's nothing new, right? It's a tried and true strategy, especially, again, during the current economic climate. But I do think that it's all about how do we help our customers do things easier, faster, with fewer resources, because that's something that we're all dealing with. We just did our Forrester Economic Total Impact study, and it showed a lot of really great value that we can go back to our customer and show. So the solution pays for itself within 6 months, 172% ROI. And the biggest really thing for our customers is that they're able to investigate their high-risk events in half the time that they used to. So this really allows them to reallocate 2.5 FTEs to other projects. And again, with all of us being constrained with resources, budgets, this was really important for us. So what we've done is created a calculator for them to be able to put their unique inputs in there and show their bosses, their boards, their C-suite, how they're bringing this to value and how they're keeping their organization safe by using very few resources and having a really strong ROI. So that's just an example of something that we've done in the last 3 months to be able to help our customers show value internally within their organization.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So you're in essence helping them make the case, helping them do their jobs better. I'm curious, as you focus on that customer marketing and that, let's just say, post first sale, right?
Sure.
Where most of that customer lifetime value is realized. How are you breaking that down? Do you actually do a journey map of saying, hey, now that they're a customer, these are the stages we go through. And then also, where does experience play into that? And how are you trying to deliver that customer experience, which is so important in B2B?
Yeah, we've actually done a customer health scorecard. So we are able to see kind of how our customers move and where we need to pay a lot of attention. I think for us, we are a one product company, right? And so as much as we would love to say we were going to cross sell, upsell for growth, we just need to provide a good customer experience that comes both from our support organization, that comes from onboarding, that comes from our POC to full implementation, making that process really, really easy. So we've spent a lot of resources and time really focusing on those things so that if somebody does a POC, they can move to product right away. And all those experiences have really helped us. And what we're seeing recently is that, in cybersecurity, tenures of cybersecurity leaders are pretty short, kind of like CMOs, average of 1.5 to 2 years. And so we see people moving a lot, and we see them come back to us and bring us in again because the experience was great, right? Both from the support organization, from the time they ran a POC, they trust us. And in cybersecurity, again, that's a really, really big element because marketing doesn't have the best reputation in this industry.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, there's a lot of industries where marketing is still trying to create a new reputation. I want to stay on that customer journey a little bit. So you're a one product company. How important is it then? You mentioned the experience and you mentioned your support group, which I love that you're working with them and collaborating there.
Yes.
How much time are you spending on that immediate post-purchase? Because I have this belief that even in B2B, there's a lot of buyer's remorse. Not that we made the bad decision, but it's like, oh my word, I just spent all this money. And it's like, gulp. What are we, and research is showing even now some of the fear-based approach that is coming into B2B. So how much are you spending immediate after purchase to help drive adoption and make sure that onboarding, you mentioned the POC to full product, it is as good as it can be? And are you finding that that is impacting a positive impact or having a positive impact on retention?
Yeah, we actually stood up a whole new team. So we have our CSM team, but we've stood up a whole CSE, customer service experience organization, to really ensure that we're able to help them onboard. Plus, what we've done is, because of the buyer's remorse, we're big into Jolt Effect by Matt Dixon right now as well. Really looking at how can we give them 1 to 2 things to start with, right? Customers get really overwhelmed. There's a lot to deal with, especially in our industry. There's a lot of risk. So really honing in and customizing what's important to your business. And how do we do 1 to 2 use cases? Let's start here. Let's help you grow, and then you can expand. So really being customer focused and not trying to say, look at our product, it's fabulous, it can do 20 million things. I think that's really overwhelming for customers, and that really plays more into that buying remorse because they're like, I don't know where to start.
Sure.
So really, again, being customer centric by focusing one to 2 things. We've also increased our education. So we actually have what we called an IRM program launchpad inside of risk management, which is the space we play in, program launchpad. And what that means is, like, we give them nice, easy videos, or we give them templates. Here's, acceptable use template that you can use right now, just adjust it a little bit to what you need in your business. So it's those value add assets that really we don't make any additional revenue on, but that provide a ton of value to our customers, where we've seen that really play a big role.
I absolutely love that. I love that you created a new team to focus in on those areas. It's so vitally important. And I find that so many organizations skip that step. And it's like, well, they bought something, let's pass them off to professional services. And now let's go
Exactly.
and cross-sell them. And they're like, whoa, we're just getting used to you guys. And now you're coming at me with another pitch. Let me kind of settle in. Let me make sure that this is a good marriage. Then we can maybe talk about a retention play or something like that. So congrats to you guys for that. That is absolutely phenomenal. I'm going to start pointing to Code 42 and saying, hey, this is what they've done. You guys should do this as well because it's having a huge impact. You mentioned doing less with more. You actually had a post about that recently on LinkedIn.
Yes.
I know it was security focused, but you're leading a global marketing team. I'm sure you're not, you don't have all these open head counts. I was talking to Craig Rosenberg on a previous episode, and he was saying, it used to be the days where people were just throwing money around, and, post COVID, that's not been the case. So how are you managing? How are you coping in terms of the mandate hasn't changed to drive growth? I'm probably not going to have all that I need from a budget or personnel perspective, but I still have to deliver. So talk about that a little bit and what some of the things that you're doing to be successful.
I think it really comes down to two things under the same principle, and that principle is ruthless prioritization. The number one thing for us that's changed a lot of the ways that we work is agile marketing. So my team works in 2-week sprints. Shout out to Mike DePietro from JMI, one of our private equity companies that's helped us transition to this methodology almost a year ago now. That really helps us focus on the big initiatives that are aligned to our organizational goals. So we have really 3 categories within that: must do, epic or projects, very important, and foundational. And so with, when we're forced to prioritize with fewer resources, fewer people, then it's really easy to know what comes first, second, and third. And so I would highly recommend this to any marketing leader. Alex Goby, our previous CMO, she was a big proponent of it. She's really the one that brought it into the organization. She's now putting it at her new organization in place. And so it was a little scary at first, but I could never go back to not working in the Agile process, because everyone understands the priorities. There are no surprises. If we need to shift things, because things always come up, especially for marketing, we can say, okay, in order to do this, we're going to have to give up that. And we typically can give it up from the buckets that are not as important. So it's really helped our team to focus and prioritize, and that's made a lot of difference for us, again, with fewer resources. And then the second thing I would say is automation and AI. And I know AI is a big buzzword right now, but we've actually really been able to use it in very specific use cases. So for example, we use 6 Sense conversational email. So that's helped us streamline close loss programs by leveraging one-on-one conversations, recognizing that that's somebody that's already engaged with us, that knows us, and really being able to leverage that. We also use that conversational AI email for webinar lead follow-ups. For our commercial accounts, right? They need additional qualification, but we don't have SDR, BDR bandwidth for that. We use that for mid-market and enterprise. And so those are some of the areas where we've been able to just automate things, use AI to our advantage where possible, but again, very specific use cases. And then our Agile really methodology has helped us a ton.
So what you just described comes with a lot of change. I'm sure when you started to introduce Agile a year ago, there were people like, whoa, this isn't how we do it, right? Some of the worst words in business. We've never done it this way. So how do you continue to manage the change? Because even AI, you turn around, everybody's saying we're using AI, and some of it is just, as my friend Dave Brock likes to say, helping produce mediocrity at scale. But how do you manage all that change globally to say, hey, we're shifting the way we work, number one, which scares people. And then number two, we're going to bring in new technology, but we're going to use it purposefully and not just, take off the shackles and let anybody use it. How did that process work, and what other departments did you bring in to help manage that change, if any?
I think on the Agile, because we are a technology company, that methodology is very familiar to people in tech, especially, our R&D and development organization. So I think it wasn't a completely foreign concept. We've also, like I mentioned, Mike DePietro, we've talked to other companies that he's helped implement. And from the get-go, he said to us, unless the leadership team is on board, everyone else can have doubts. This team cannot have doubts. And so, our CMO pushing it, but also her leadership team at the time, all of us saying like, okay, what doubts do we have? Let's talk about it amongst us friends. Let's iron them out and make sure that we are the biggest proponents of it. We're the biggest users of it. And as a leadership team, one thing that we had to be very conscious of doing is, once a new thing, we call it add to current, right? Something that wasn't planned for, but it's coming in, that we ask, what are we taking off? right? That team member that's taking that task on, that we say to them, okay, you only have X number of points allocated for the sprint. That's your bandwidth. What are we, let's as a team decide. And so openly talking about those things to let the team know that, hey, we're invested in this. And also when something gets added, something else gets taken off the list. But I think as a leadership team, you have to be the one to really drive that. And then I think also just with time, you realize how many points the team typically accomplishes. So what we were doing at the beginning is signing up for way too many points and realizing that we're only complete, let's say signing up for 2,000 points, but we're only completing on average 1,400 points. So then that becomes your compass, and you say, okay, we cannot sign up for any more than 14 to 1,500 points. But again, as a leadership team, you have to be the one providing that message. And I think that really builds trust with the team that, okay, this has actually helped to make me help me focus, and this is also here to help me make sure that I don't go above, my bandwidth, the points that I have. So, again, that prioritization and having the leadership team aligned worked really well. On the AI side of things, I think it was just, I'm a big proponent of piloting things, not just a big bang theory. We're going to do AI, right? But what does that actually mean? So even when we started conversational email with 6 Sense, we started it as a pilot, and we had 2 very specific use cases that we were going to use it with. And so I think it's taking it slow, proving those out, and then saying, okay, how can we expand from here? That builds trust with everyone there. We also started slow. It was very manual AI at first. We did a lot of human review until they came out with a new feature that said, okay, now we're going to show you 10 different scenarios where the AI is responding. Do you review all of them? Do you trust all those responses? So I think it's taking it in phases and making sure that you're bringing people along little by little versus doing a big bang and saying, okay, we're just going to go AI and, wild, wild west, everyone do with it what you want.
I love that. As you were talking about the points, signing up for the points, but only accomplishing, I was having PTSD flashbacks to my college career where I signed up for, and very few actually ever got done. But here I am, and it all worked out. In terms of that change as well, what was that relationship like with sales? Because as we know, you can have, from a marketing lens perspective, we can say, hey, we're doing all the right things. But if it doesn't translate further down to pipeline creation, close,
Sure.
it doesn't matter. So how did you manage that relationship? Or was it you kind of walked into a great relationship to begin with?
No, unfortunately. I think many of us would be privileged to walk in that type of relationship. I do think that the one advantage we had is we already spoke the same language with sales. So we had already let go of the MQL world. Hey, look at marketing's meeting all their MQL goals, but yet sales is not meeting their quotas. And so we were already speaking the same language of pipeline. And I think that's the number one step. So I think it's much easier to move forward with change when you're speaking pipeline from both a marketing and a sales standpoint than when you're talking, 2 different languages. So that definitely helped. But also, at the time, our leader aligned with the sales leader to say, this is how we work now. So like when you have inbound things, we're going to have to readjust. And we also just set the expectation that unless it was urgent from a business standpoint, we're going to say, we have our 2 weeks planned for, but we'll put that in our next sprint. And so it was just like using that terminology that we work in 2-week sprints, making sure that the executive team understood that, was aligned to it. And again, if it's priorities do change, but that should be the exception, not the rule. So we were very comfortable saying from the top, we're going to include that in our next 2-week sprint. And so I think people just get used to that, but also sharing and having visibility what we accomplished in each sprint and sharing that with the executive team so they know what we're focused on and that it's the right type of priorities.
So that last piece I think is so important. It's something that I encourage every marketer to do is evangelize what you're doing, and not with vanity metrics of, oh, we increased our website visits by 6%.
Exactly.
Who cares?
What does that mean?
Right. Yeah. What does that translate to? So I think it's so important to evangelize both the good and the bad. Like, hey, here's what we planned, but to your point, here's the only things that we could accomplish, and here's why. Or we really thought this was going to go off without a hitch and drive revenue, and it didn't, but here's what we've learned from that. So
exactly.
Process that it sounds like it's now just part of that culture within marketing to say, hey, we are going to have open the kimono a little bit, let everybody in and show them what they're doing. And then how do you process that feedback? You mentioned ruthless prioritization. How do you manage the feedback when other executives are saying, well, yeah, but we need this, but your data shows actually that we can do that, but it might be 3 or 4 sprints down the road?
We're very data driven, so that definitely helps. And then we also have at our highest level of the organization, we have what's called big rocks. So those are our 3 to 4 goals for the year. Then we in marketing take those down and we boil them down to our OKRs. And then those objectives and key results are what drives our epics and what drives the must do, very important and foundational. And so I think that process really helps us to, from the get-go, be aligned with the organizational goals. So if there's something that's a must do epic or program and the executive team doesn't align to that, then that's on me for not setting the right objectives. So again, I think because we trickle it down that way, the likelihood of that happening is pretty low.
Well, and I love the fact that you said, hey, there's 3, maybe 4 organizational goals.
Yes.
Reading a report, I can't remember who put it out, but it was talking about the rising complexity in marketing, where marketing is kind of like marketing has become this catch-all. Spearheading AI, as you've described, customer experience, demand capture, whether it's lead-based or ABM, technology, it's so much. And the fact that you guys are saying there's 3 to 4 things we know we can execute on. That's it. Everything else, if you want to get spread so thin, there's no substance there. And I don't think you're going to do a lot of good work. So is that an annual planning thing, or is that more of like a 1 year, 3 year, 5 year goal setting? How does that work with you and the executive team?
It's an annual thing, but honestly, this year we've even gone to half year increments just to be very focused. And it's also just due to nature of some of the legacy businesses that we're trying to shed and move on from. So that's part of the reason. But I really actually like the half year goals because it really helps us focus. And since our team has gotten smaller, like everyone else's, we've actually, even our OKRs have gotten smaller. So it just really helps us to prioritize and to say, what are we not going to do just as much as what we are going to do? The one big paradigm shift is ensuring, it's easy for me to speak because my company doesn't see marketing as a service bureau. And I think a lot of other organizations do. And I think that's where it's really hard to make that shift and say we're only going to focus on X number of goals. But for me, I'm fortunate that our CEO sees marketing as a revenue organization, that our company, we've come a long way. It wasn't always this way, but marketing is not seen just as a service bureau. We are actually seen as a strategic partner in the organization.
First of all, I'm a huge fan of that. I think, that where you're sitting, as you well know, has kind of been the envy of marketers forever. But I've also seen, and I'm curious to your take, and you don't have to agree with me just because you're a guest on the show, is I see marketers kind of speaking out of both sides of their mouths on this, where we want a seat at the revenue table. We want to be that growth partner. We know we can demonstrate growth, but I need to show my value to the business. So I'll be that service bureau and take every request that's thrown at me, not push back, and not use data to say, let me tell you why we're not going to do that. So have you seen that, or what would you say to a CMO or a head of marketing who's trying to play both sides of that fence?
I honestly think that the only way to prove value is by creating pipeline as a marketer. But I've always been a demand and growth marketer. So I think for me, that comes just more naturally. I think, brand is hugely important. But when you talk about brand guidelines and focusing on that and spending time and activity on that, I'm like, okay, that's important up to a degree, but then how much is too much and how much are you just spending time on nitpicking at things that honestly just don't matter? And so for me, I've always spoken the revenue language. And for me, that is proving value, activity and being busy I don't know how much value that can possibly prove, even though you might be, the nice person in the organization and everyone may like you because you're fulfilling their requests. I think you get a lot more respect when you focus on results and when you give opportunities to sales reps and they're knocking on your door saying, we want more of this.
Oh, wow. Yes, I've had that when I worked in the software, and kind of, it sounds like, we could probably compare war stories of what we walked into. But when I started reps coming in and saying, hey, we closed another one. I mean, they're right. And marketing played a role in that. We weren't trying to sit down and say, well, we did that and you did that. It was together, we closed. And it wasn't I closed another one, it was we closed another one. And when you get that sort of alignment, and I'm curious to your take, I don't think alignment's really the problem. I think alignment's a symptom of bigger problems.
Mm-hmm.
And so you mentioned, you weren't always perfectly aligned with sales. So beyond the data, how did you help close that gap to say, hey, this isn't a us versus you, who gets credit, although measurement's important, but we need to go at this together. Bring me through, if you can, a little bit of that journey, and what were some of those milestones where you started to see the light bulbs come on both sides to say, we can make this work?
Number one, we stopped talking about marketing sourced. So for our team, we look at it, right? We want to make sure we want to touch everything.
Yeah.
But it was not a conversation. We do not go on the win wire when a win is announced and say, this was a marketing sourced lead or an account. So that was a shift for our own team who, works really hard and wants that credit. I think we've learned how to give that credit internally on the marketing side only. But I think just stop talking about marketing source was number one. Number two was bringing sales to the table. So I've been guilty of this in the past, and I kind of had to learn the hard way that marketing can get too sophisticated. And if you do that, you can have the most sophisticated programs in the world, but if you're not bringing your sales reps along and they don't understand what you're doing, your sophistication is kind of pointless. It doesn't really lead to anything. And so we were actually at one point there. And I had to take a step back and say, okay, there's a lot of innovation in marketing, but we are just getting too far ahead of ourselves. And what we're doing is just leading things and working on our own and not bringing our sales partners along the way. So we had to kind of pause and reset and do that. And then the other thing is that we own the SDR org in marketing. And so that is the biggest source of pipeline volume. And so that, again, provides a really big value to the sales org. And when they see that you're invested and you're bringing pipeline to them, again, you get a seat at the table and the alignment kind of falls in place.
Okay, so when are you going on your speaking tour to educate organizations on, like, this is how it's done? It doesn't happen overnight, but like, stay the course, focus on these things. I mean, you got to get out there. I'm just going to start.
Thanks, Carlos.
I'm just going to start submitting you and putting in speaker requisitions for you. And you're going to start getting phone calls of like, hey, we've got you booked to keynote. Because I think it's,
that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say, that epic picture with the iceberg.
Yes.
Like, so all the things. So like, it's been a hard fought battle. I wish I could say that this just happened overnight and I walked into it. It's a lot of failing and a lot of learning. And like I said, my team has gotten too sophisticated and we were beating ourselves over the head. Like, we're so sophisticated. We were running all these sophisticated programs. Why isn't it turning into revenue? It's because we weren't working closely with sales and we weren't bringing them along. So I think that, just looking in the mirror every once in a while and saying, okay, it's not that we're bringing all this great stuff and they're not closing it. It's that we're just leaving them behind and not bringing them on the journey. And then one other thing that's really, I saw the sales reps kind of bulk go off, which is, a rare thing in sales and marketing, is building journeys. So to your point of, not being marketing sourced, or we brought this in, or I closed this, but saying like, hey, we did this event a year ago. Somebody from the account came. Then we ran this advertising and they came. Then you sent a bunch of emails and they responded. Then, you had a demo, but they weren't ready. And then, this happened and then it became an opportunity. And then these three things happened and we closed the deal. And so showing that journey, again, being data driven, that was like an aha moment for our sales reps. They're like, wow, I had no idea how much activity happens that I wasn't even aware of, to really bring that customer in. And so then it really shows, and like marketing, building that journey, but then saying, but really the key to winning this deal, that this was a past customer, right? That went to another company and that played a big role. And not being shy about that. It doesn't mean that everything else we've done doesn't matter. It just means that it was a big contributor to us winning that deal. And I think that just honesty and transparency really builds trust.
Oh, I would think so. And again, sales, I was talking about this with somebody. I said, sales is pretty simplistic because it's, as much as I've done marketing my career, I've been in sales. It's connect me with a potential customer, let me engage them, help them make the most informed decision possible, nurture that relationship, close the deal, like blinders on. And to your point with marketing, there's so much we can do. And I love that it was, hey, let's park our egos here. We know what we're capable of, but let's slow down. And Chip and Dan Heath write about this in some of their books, right? It's bringing that, they refer to it as the elephant rider, bring them along, might happen slower. And then there's probably peaks that you mentioned, the failure. There's peaks and valleys. Change and progress are rarely like this, right?
Yes.
You climb, you go down, only to go back up. And I love, thank you for sharing some of that, because I think more marketers need to understand sales is not trying to be difficult. No. Sales knows they have a number to hit. And if they don't hit it, their replacement's going to be brought in and they're going to be looking for a job. So they're not they're not trying to be difficult. And eventually, if you can't bring them along, they're going to say, forget marketing. I'll go do it. Because they've got to hit
100%.
That. Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
All right. So if you weren't in B2B marketing demand side, what would you do? What would you be doing?
I would be dancing. So, big childhood dreams. My childhood dream was to be Madonna's backup dancer. And I know, children are allowed to dream big. And as adults, I think we kind of dream smaller and forget about that. But it's always been a passion of mine. And I still try to do it as often as possible. But anyone that knows me knows that that's one of my biggest hobbies. And I don't care if it's the kickoff event for work or if it's, my husband and I just go salsa dancing. It's just something that keeps my energy up, makes me happy and smile. And so that I would be a dancer.
Do you request Madonna when you're out dancing so you can kind of throw yourself in and be like, nah, it's about as close as I'm going to get?
And not anymore. I think that you don't hear her songs as much anymore. I think it's really anything with the rhythm that, I can get grooving. So not too picky. My genres are pretty widespread.
I love it. Well, I am a horrible dancer. I have a series of dance moves that my kids are they shake their head because my daughter's an incredible. I just don't care because I'm like, I'm just going to go have fun. And I know I have no.
I love that.
So
I love that.
I actually think Madonna's back on tour. I saw a little.
Is she really?
My wife showed me and I'm like, yeah, it's just not working anymore. And again, happens. There's no shame in that, but she may need to tone it down. So who knows? She may have open auditions if she comes to Atlanta.
My next gig.
Yeah, exactly. Well, hey, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the podcast, on the Growthology podcast. Seriously, one of the best marketing conversations I've had in a long time, just about the process, the approach, the thought behind it, and just the path to growth. One last question is, so how do you maintain that momentum? I know you have the goal setting. Seems like you're locked in with sales, but we know that's not a one-time, that's a constant relationship. So what are you doing to maintain the momentum that you have there at Code 42?
Always trying new things, never getting stagnant. Right now, we're trying what we call our sales sprints, picking a list of accounts that sales is going after. And then our SD, so for example, going after a vertical right now. So each sales rep has 10 accounts and they're going after those. We've enabled them with messaging, but didn't say you must use this messaging. It's just the starting point. They can customize as they see fit. And now we're going back and forth on what should be our next sprint. What should we focus on there? And we're actually changing it right now. So I think being agile and being flexible, because we were going to do one use case, but a partnership happened in the meantime. And now I have reps coming to me and saying, should we reconsider what that next sprint should be based on? Can we do this? And it's a conversation that you're always willing and able to have. And I think just being flexible, being agile, and listening. I think as humans, we don't listen enough. So like one of our biggest sales champions, I have a monthly one-on-one with him now because he's so eager to give ideas, which is something we don't see in sales a lot. So I'm like, I am going to give you the time. And so this change came out of my conversation with him. And so I brought it to other people and said, does this make sense? Can we do this? Let's adjust, let's be agile. So I think being open, never stagnant, and just continuing the conversation.
I'm telling you, I'm submitting you for a bunch of conferences to just go speak. So it is, I mean, it is so refreshing because I'm like, if every marketing leader could just soak this in, and I know there's a lot of things at play, right? There's some CEOs who don't understand marketing, but man, oh man, what a journey, what a story. So thank you for sharing it. It's going to be a great episode, no doubt. We'll put all of your contact details, not your phone number, but your LinkedIn profile. We'll put code 42 there in the speaker notes. And so we want to thank Aida for joining us, for sharing her experience and her wisdom on the Growthology podcast. And for all marketers, for all growth professionals out there, it's a great time to be in B2B, and we hope that you make the most of it. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Carlos.